She was on her knees, arms limp, head bowed. Ash clung to her skin like soot on burnt timber. He stepped from the porch, froze. Every animal in the valley, horses, goats, cattle, stood motionless, all facing her. Eyes wide, breath held. Not one sound, not even birds. She didn't move, didn't blink. The earth around her looked scorched. He called out. Nothing. Took a step. The dog at his heel whined and backed away. His boots sank into blackened soil. The closer he got, the colder the air felt. Then she raised her head. Her eyes were open but wrong, not vacant, not blind. Watching something behind him. That's when he heard the first hoofbeat, not hers, not his, and not alone. He sat still, rifle balanced across his lap. Lamplight swayed against the log walls. The desert night outside pressed in quiet and close. No wind, no crickets, just the creak of old timber and the slow settling of dust on the floor. The barn groaned once. He did not move. His boot stayed planted, one hand near the trigger, the other resting on his knee. The chair beneath him felt like stone. Hours passed. He did not count them. When he finally stood, the rifle came with him. The barn door opened with a reluctant breath. Inside, the mare shifted once, then stilled again. Its eyes watched him, wide and wet with fear. She lay on the hay, curled on her side, bare arms exposed. He crouched beside her. Marks ran along the skin, not fresh, not wounds, just lines, swirls, symbols that meant nothing to him, inkless and perfect, faint like a memory. He reached to touch one, but his hand stopped just above. Something in his gut warned him. Same way a man knows not to step where a rattler curls in the brush. He stood again, closed the door without sound. Back inside, he poured half a cup of water, left it untouched on the table, took the chair again, rested the rifle. But his eyes were no longer on the door. They drifted toward the shelf. One toy sat there, dust-covered, wooden, carved like a horse. One ear chipped. It had not moved in 6 years. Neither had the soil outside. He remembered the way the shovel had sunk back then. The ground was softer than it should have been, still warm from the day his daughter died. He had dug deep, no words, no prayer, just earth, and the silence of a man breaking in half. He remembered his wife screaming after, telling him they should leave, said something had gone wrong, said the land was hollow now. She left before the next moon. He stayed. The soil never took again. Seeds sat in it like stones. The well dried 2 winters later. Animals birthed still. Some just wandered off and never came back. He stopped planting, stopped trying. But he never moved. Never left the house, not really. Until today. He blinked. Something felt off again. The light was wrong, too dim. Then he heard it. A soft thump outside. Not a noise of struggle, not a cry, just a footfall. He moved to the window. The grave sat under moonlight. Dry. Rocks marked its edge. Nothing had disturbed it in 6 years. Now she stood beside it, still covered in ash, still barefoot. Her eyes were open, and she was looking straight at him. The sun had barely crested when he saddled his horse and rode. Dry earth cracked beneath each step. No birds moved across the sky. No dogs barked. No cattle lowed. The land felt like it was holding its breath. At the first ranch, 3 cows stood in the pen, eyes glassy, heads turned toward the hills, unblinking. A child sat cross-legged on the porch, arms wrapped tight around his knees. He didn't speak, just shook his head when asked. Second ranch. Same thing. Goats silent. Chickens perched without sound. A mule lay flat beside the trough, still alive, but not drinking. He rode faster now. By noon, the preacher had arrived, dismounted in front of the store with dust on his collar and sweat soaked down his back. Said he had come from the high trail. Said he had seen something near the ridge. Not a man. Not a beast. Something walking wrong, like it had forgotten how bones worked. Folks didn't answer. They just looked past him, toward the valley. Back home, the woman was in the field. She stood barefoot again, her skin still smudged with ash, her eyes locked on the soil beneath her. He watched from a distance. She knelt, pressed her palms into the dirt, then began dragging her fingers through it, slow, careful, the same marks as before, spirals, crossed lines, one symbol over and over again, a loop with a tail bent backward. He stepped closer. She did not look up. When he asked what it meant, she said nothing. The ground felt wrong beneath his boots, like it hummed. Not a sound, a feeling, a weight pressing upward, as if the earth wanted to speak but could not. The mare at the fence refused to move, its ears pinned flat, breath shallow. The sun climbed high, but no warmth touched the skin. By mid-afternoon, even the flies were gone. He stood with a neighbor at the fence. Neither spoke. Both watched the field. The woman kept drawing. The ground began to pulse, slow, faint, but steady. A tremor, without noise, as if something below was breathing once every few minutes. He dropped to one knee, pressed his hand flat to the dirt. It pulsed again. His neighbor backed away, mouth dry, eyes wide. He pointed at the mare. She shifted. One leg twitched, then snapped. A sharp crack broke the silence, bone against bone. The mare fell, screamed once, rolled on its side, eyes wild with pain. It had not moved, not run, not slipped, just stood, and still it broke. He stared at the leg, bent in a shape that did not belong. Then he looked at the woman. She was staring at the hills, and the hills looked back. The trail to the old mission had not been ridden in years. Dry mesquite clawed at his sleeves as the horse pushed forward. The air hung still. Dust lifted behind each hoof and settled fast. No birds, no snakes. No sound but leather creak and hoofbeat. The mission rose like a bleached husk against the hill. Adobe walls cracked with age. The cross above the chapels leaned left, shadow falling crooked across the courtyard. He dismounted without tying the reins. The horse did not wander. Inside, the air was stale with parchment and candle wax long gone cold. He called out. No voice answered. Just echo? Just memory. The priest had died 2 winters after the burial. Fever. No one took his place. No one came here now but wind and time. He moved through the small chapel. The pews were brittle, the altar bare. Behind it, the small door to the priest's room groaned open. Dust swirled where his boots stepped. A shelf lined the wall, worn books, records, names of births and deaths carved into paper that had yellowed and curled. He searched, pushed past brittle sermons and ink-faded prayers. Then he found the box. It held journals. Not official, not bound. Just collections of rough pages tied with rawhide, each marked with years long past. Settlers, mission hands, some in Spanish, some in English. Notes on crops, disease, drought, and stories. One spoke of a girl with red eyes who stood in the riverbed before it turned dry. Another of cattle freezing solid under a summer sun. But one caught his eye. The cover held a date, 40 years ago. He opened it with care. Inside, the writer spoke of a figure seen at dawn, a woman of fire and silence. She did not walk. She did not speak. She knelt in the dust and marked the soil with signs no one understood. 2 days later, the mine collapsed. 19 men buried alive. Another entry. Another town. Same woman. Same symbols. The writer said she came before the sickness. Children fell first. Then the old. Then the ones who tried to bury her. He turned the page. A drawing. The same looped symbol the woman had carved into his field. The same twist at the base. The same arc cut sharp at the top, drawn by a different hand, decades earlier. He stared at it, his mouth dry. His hands trembled as he read the final note written below it. It was not a warning of doom. It was not fear. It was sorrow. The last line read, "She kneels to warn not to curse." but no one ever listens. He rode hard through the dusk. The sun behind him fell low, burning the tops of the hills in quiet red. Dust chased the horse's heels. Each hoof strike hit harder than the last. He gripped the journal in one hand. The other stayed close to his belt. His mouth pressed tight. His eyes locked ahead. By the time he reached the gate, the light had thinned. The barn stood quiet. Too quiet. The animals had moved to the far side of the pasture. All of them faced the same direction. Not him. Not the house. The field. He slid from the saddle before the horse stopped, marched straight toward the barn, threw open the door. She was there, kneeling again. Her head bowed, her fingers drawing more shapes into the dirt, the same ones, over and over. He stepped forward. She did not flinch. He dropped the journal at her feet. She looked up. His voice came rough and sharp. He asked her what she was, what she had done, why every man in the valley was losing livestock and sleep, why nothing breathed right anymore. She stared through him. Then she spoke. Her voice was dry, slow, but clear. Something old lives beneath this valley. It was asleep, but something woke it. Now it remembers. It remembers what was taken and it wants it back. He stepped back. His boots shifted dry straw. She said no more, just watched him. He asked her how she knew, demanded she explain. She stood. She was not tall, not strong, not armed. But still he stepped back again. She said nothing else. He reached for her arm. She did not resist, but she did not blink either. He called her cursed. Witch. Liar. Said she was the reason the mare broke. Said she was the reason the water died. Said she brought the ash and the silence and the rot that lived in every hoof and breath now. Still she stood. He grabbed rope from the wall, pulled her wrists together, tight. She did not cry out, did not speak. He tied her to the post at the center of the barn, the one that held the beams together, then stepped back. The ground shifted, not above, below. A sound rolled through the soil like thunder behind glass. The boards underfoot creaked. The horses outside screamed. He turned toward the floor. A crack split through the earth beneath the hay. Fast, violent, wide. The rope snapped. She fell forward onto her hands. The dirt around her hands turned dark. The symbol she had drawn began to burn. But there was no fire, just light, from below. The wind had risen fast that night. It carried grit through the valley, sharp enough to cut the lips. He dug anyway. Hands blistered, back bent, shovel striking earth that resisted every inch, dry on the surface, wet and heavy just below. His daughter's body lay wrapped in wool, no box, no stone, just the blanket from her cot and the silence of two broken people who could no longer speak to each other. His wife stood nearby, face streaked with dirt and tears. One hand clutched her stomach, the other held the doll, its cloth arm torn, eyes missing their buttons. She had sewn it when the child was born, repaired it 5 times, never threw it out. He asked her for it. She shook her head. He shouted. She gave it to him. He placed it beside the small shape in the hole, then shoveled fast, faster than he should have. Dust swept across the yard. The mare bucked against the post and screamed into the wind. Thunder rumbled low across the ridge. Dry lightning danced between the hills. No priest came. No prayer. No final words. The last thing buried was the shovel. He dropped it and walked away without brushing the dirt from his knees. Inside, the house groaned with the storm. His wife sat at the edge of the bed and told him it was wrong. Said they had made a mistake, that something in the land had changed, that she had felt it the moment the last shovel hit the earth. He said nothing. She packed her things that night, took only what she could carry, did not cry when she left. He watched her walk the trail without turning back. Her dress caught in the wind like it wanted to pull her apart. She did not return. The next morning, the well water ran cloudy. By noon, it stopped running altogether. He dug again, deeper, wider, found nothing. The animals began pacing the edge of the property, refused to enter the field. The dog howled through the night without cause. Then one day it wandered off and never came back. He boarded the door to his daughter's room, stacked a crate in front of it. But he never moved the doll. He knew where it was, buried beside her, under hard earth and quiet regret. Years passed, the grass died, then the insects, then the sound. Only now, 6 years later, as he stood again over the crack in his barn floor, did he feel it. Not guilt, not grief, recognition. The knot in the earth, the way the animals had warned, the way the symbols had matched. He had not just buried her. He had buried something older, something sacred, and he had broken its sleep. The ground would not stop moving. It rolled underfoot like a ship at sea. Planks creaked, nails pulled loose from beams. Dust rained from the rafters. He braced himself against the doorframe and shouted out, but his voice broke in his throat. Outside, the valley groaned, a sound too deep to come from any throat. It came from beneath, from the old bones of the land. Horses screamed. One bolted straight into the fence, shattered the post. Blood poured from its chest and it kept running. Chickens flung themselves against their coop walls. Goats cried out and fell stiff. Eyes rolled, jaws snapped at nothing. He ran to the barn. The woman was still where she had fallen. The rope had burned clean through. Her hands rested on the dirt, her eyes open. He hesitated. She looked at him. He cut the rest of the binding, helped her up. Her knees shook. Her skin felt cold. She whispered, "Not too late. Not yet." But something must be returned. He did not ask what. He already knew. He grabbed a spade from the wall and ran. The field lay empty. Animals gone, the fence broken. The earth cracked like dry skin. He dropped to his knees and struck the first blow. The dirt flew easier than it had 6 years ago. Loose, unwilling to hold. His hands blistered fast. Sweat poured down his back. The shovel struck something solid. He cleared more. A board, rotting, thin. He tore it back with bare hands. Nails ripped through his palm. He kept going. Beneath it, a bundle, small, still wrapped. He touched the cloth. It crumbled at the edges. And there it was, the doll. Untouched, no dust, no damage. Its thread still red, its cloth still smooth, as if it had been sewn that morning. He stared. The valley shook again, harder. A fence post dropped into the ground behind him. Whole sections of the pasture sank without sound. The woman stepped forward. Her feet moved with care. Her eyes locked on the doll. He did not speak. She knelt beside him and pointed. The grave beside them opened further, cracked wide like a mouth. She did not look at him, just held out her hand. He took the doll, held it once, felt its weight, then placed it back in the earth, gently. The moment it left his palm, the shaking slowed. Dust settled. Wind brushed across the soil for the first time in weeks. He looked up. The animals had returned to the ridge. They stood still, watching, silent, waiting. He pressed both hands into the soil and began covering the doll. He sat by the open grave with dirt on his hands and silence in his chest. The doll lay below, untouched by time, its stitched mouth smiling in a way that no longer felt kind. Behind him, the woman knelt once more. Her eyes were half closed, her palms pressed into the soil as if she could hear something beneath it. The earth still breathed, slow, shallow, waiting. He asked her what more it wanted, what more could be taken. She looked up, her voice barely carried. It does not want blood. It wants to be remembered. He stared at the land, at the cracked fence lines, the rotting trough, the house that had not known a warm meal in 6 years. He remembered the girl's laugh before her fever, the doll in her hand as she ran across the dry grass, the day the well stopped flowing, the night his wife left. He clenched his fists. This was all he had left. She stood and pointed to the field. The ash still lingered there, pale streaks in the dust. The marks she had drawn had begun to vanish. the earth pulling them down into its skin. You must choose. He looked away. The past had grown roots here. Deep ones, roots made of memory and guilt and habit. Letting go would mean tearing those up, leaving the house, the grave, the ghosts. He stepped toward the field. The wind passed over it but did not move it. No leaves, no stalks, just empty soil that had not given life since the day he buried her. He took another step. The ground pulsed once, a slow heave under his boots, the same rhythm from before. He turned. The woman had not followed. He looked past her. The fence line shimmered. Figures stood along it, thin, still. Not men, not beasts. Shadows that held shape for a moment too long. They did not move, did not speak. But he felt them in his gut, in the air. They waited. For him. He turned back to the field. He knew what it meant now. To remember was not to speak a name. It was to let go. To burn what bound him. To give it back to the earth and let the land breathe again. He walked to the shed, pulled the oil from the shelf, carried it to the edge of the field. The figure stayed, watching. The woman approached, her face pale with dust, her arms scratched from rope and stone. She held out her hand. A single match sat in her palm, no smoke yet, no flame, just the weight of the choice. He looked at it and reached out. The match struck against the box with a dry rasp. Flame flared in the still air. He held it low, watched it burn, watched the tip darken into black. Then he touched it to the oil-soaked edge of the field. It caught quick. Flames ran across the soil like they knew where to go. Straight lines, sharp turns. They followed the path of the symbols once drawn in dust. Old marks made by hands that remembered something he had forgotten. The fire spread fast. It did not wait. It climbed the fence. It curled beneath the posts. It rose toward the sky in bright ribbons. Heat hit his face. Smoke rolled low to the ground, not high like it should have, thick and crawling. It circled him. Screams rose from the earth. Not human, not animal, not wind. They came from the soil itself, deep and hollow, like memory being pulled from roots too long buried. He staggered back. The field glowed orange and gold. The flames moved with rhythm, not chaos, a pattern. Like breath, like speech. The animals fled, hooves thundering over the ridge, even the hawks scattered. The woman stepped into the center of it all. Ash clung to her skin again. Her eyes glowed faintly in the light. She did not walk. She knelt, right where she had been found. The flames did not touch her. He dropped to one knee. The smoke thickened. Shapes moved within it. Not bodies, not faces. Echoes of form. Faint outlines, like heat off stone. They drifted toward the center, toward her, toward the grave. He saw his daughter, small, unmoving. She stood beside the flames, her dress unburned, her hair still tied the way it was the day she died. She looked at him, her head tilted once. Not a smile, not sorrow, just knowing. She nodded, then turned, and stepped into the smoke. The field lit brighter. The screams faded. Only fire remained. It climbed high now, reaching past the tops of the posts, toward the dark sky above. No wind moved it. No heat spread from it. It burned the memory of what had been buried. He did not move. The woman lowered her head. Her palms touched ash again. The flames roared, then folded in, downward, as if pulled back into the soil. The sound dropped all at once. No wind, no fire, no voice. Just smoke curling low across the field. Just silence. Real silence. The kind that comes after something ends. The morning air held a stillness he had never known. Not heavy, not silent in fear. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind that comes after something has lifted. He stepped from the house barefoot. The dust was cool beneath his feet. Wind moved low across the valley, not fast, not sharp, just enough to sway the grass that had not grown in years. The animals had returned. scattered across the ridge, grazing slow, ears twitching. No panic, no stillness, just life. He walked toward the field. No fire remained, no ash. Just darkened earth stretched clean to the fence line. The board still leaned. The rope on the post still hung loose. But the weight in his chest had changed. She was gone. No trace. No print in the soil. No footstep. Not even the marks she had drawn. All of it had sunk away, folded into the dirt, but something had been left behind. He reached the center of the field. A single sprout rose from the soil, bright green, fragile, new. He dropped to his knees. His hand hovered just above it, not touching, just feeling the warmth of the sun on its leaf. He reached into his coat, pulled out the doll. It had not changed, not even now. The thread still red, the cloth still soft. He held it in both hands, then placed it down beside the sprout. It sat upright in the dirt. For a long time he stayed that way, kneeling, watching. The sprout did not move, but something inside him did. He felt the years gather behind his ribs, the weight of silence, the nights with no fire, the mornings where he waited for nothing. His hands dropped to the soil. He bowed his head and wept. No sound, just tears that ran slow down skin too long dry. His shoulders shook, his chest pulled tight. The breath he released came from somewhere deeper than lungs. He had buried her. Twice, and now the land had let her go. He pressed one hand to the soil beside the sprout. The roots would take. This time they would hold. He stayed there until the sun passed the ridge. Not once did he look back toward the house. Not once did he wipe his face. The knife moved slow across the wood, each stroke shallow, careful. The grain resisted at first, then gave way. He worked with both hands. No rush, no force, just rhythm. The same way he once cut fence posts when the farm was young, when the girl still ran through the yard with her doll held tight to her chest. He finished the last letter. Let what is buried rest. The words were not perfect, the lines uneven, but they held. He stood and brushed the shavings from his lap. The marker felt warm in his palm. He crossed the yard one final time. His boots left shallow prints in the soil, soon caught by the breeze. At the center of the field, he knelt again. The sprout had grown. A second leaf now curled toward the light. Around it, others had begun to rise. Dozens. Small green tips pushed through the ash-black earth. The fire had not killed. It had cleared. He pressed the marker into the ground. Firm. Steady. It stood straight. Oh, then he stood too. His back slow to straighten. His knees stiff from days of kneeling and walking and digging in dry earth. He turned once to look across the valley. The hills still held their shape. The sky stretched wide with no cloud. The animals grazed in silence. He walked toward the house, each step steady. No pause, no backward glance. The door stood open. Light poured through the frame and touched the floor inside. His shadow disappeared into it. He passed through. The camera did not follow. It stayed with the field. The breeze moved soft across the soil. The stalks shifted. The earth breathed. Near the fence, a single crow landed. It did not speak. It only watched. Its head tilted once, then again. Black eyes held the green. The wind moved again. Not strong. Just enough to bend the sprouts. Just enough to carry the quiet. Just enough to let the land speak in a voice only the living could hear. The crow lifted into the air. Its wings caught the light. The marker stood alone. Let what is buried rest. The camera held, still, then slowly faded to black. The whisper of wind, the last sound left behind. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and comment on the Old Western Tales.